The first thing I remember after waking up was hearing a loud gasp, followed by the inane chatters and sounds of the bustling room. My whole body was sore, and the constant beeping of the machines around me felt deafening. It wasn't hard to figure out I was in the hospital, and that it was serious. I was soon greeted by various doctors and nurses, each happy, and each doing their own tests. Piecing together the story from each of them, I was in some sort of motor accident, and I'd been out for almost 2 weeks. I also seemed to have some form of amnesia. However, my wife, who had visited every day, would be able to fill me in. Though the initial shock was quite heavy, I did feel a lot better knowing I had someone as close as my wife to help me through this. My only concern was that I had no memory of ever having a wife. It wasn't long until I heard the happy squealing of a woman, followed by a very fast and heavy hug. I sensed passion, though I hesitantly reciprocated due to the fact that I couldn't shake the feeling that she seemed to be a complete stranger to me. At first, this disheartened her. However, she soon took on an optimistic demeanor and took it as a challenge we'd do together to fix. Though I didn't share her enthusiasm, I was happy in being given some direction in my otherwise confusion-filled world. I instinctively looked at my hand. No wedding ring. When I asked her about that, she said that I hated wearing rings. It did make sense. My finger joints are annoyingly big, which caused a great deal of bother to wear them. Soon, I was eating heartily, enjoying every bite, despite it being mediocre hospital food. Before I finished, however, my wife stopped me and said, "Wait, don't finish that. I have an idea." I slowly stopped, savoring the bite I had in my mouth and the one I had in my fork, stopping there to technically be following her instructions. She rushed off with a cheerful skip and a step. I sat there, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the whole situation. It didn't take long for her to bound back in and start grabbing my things and quickly shoving them in her bag. Whoa, 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 slow down. What are you doing?" I exclaimed, wide-eyed and confused. "We're getting out of here. Doctors say you can't, but I asked if anything bad would happen, and the nurse said you should be fine," she replied. I froze for a second, running over what I should do in my head, whether this was a good idea or bad. "This seems a bit too fast. Shouldn't we wait until the doctors officially discharge me?" I said, hesitantly. "Since when did you care about that? Besides, I'll have you back later. I just want to do something with you real quick," she shot back. She acted like this would have been something I'd normally have done, which made me feel I should see this through in case something came back to me. I started helping her pack. I didn't know where we were going, but it seemed like she was excited, and she was my wife, so I tried to get excited too. I spotted a business card on the table with a private number of a nurse. I presumed she was my personal nurse, so I pocketed it. We soon rushed to her car and were on the roads. I stared out the window, taking in this seemingly familiar yet unknown world. She caught attention to my pondering and asked if I remembered anything. I shook my head in a solemn way. Her face dropped a bit in sadness, but then quickly bounced back to her usual jovial demeanor. "Don't worry, everything will be fine." I soaked in her enthusiasm and chose to believe her. At this, I took note of her properly for the first time. She was very pretty. If she was my wife, I'd feel like the luckiest guy in the world. But this thought soon soured. If she was my wife. If. This one word of doubt shook my world and sent my mind spiraling. However, I couldn't quickly leap on that suspicion. For a start, if I was wrong, she'd be devastated. And if I was right, I was in a fast-moving car, and my luck with vehicles was apparently terrible as of late. I simply kept it in, mindful of the suspicion, but not revealing my suspicion just yet. Soon we pulled into a car park to a large department store. "Wait here," she said. "Can't I come with you?" I asked, wanting to keep her in sight. "No, it'll ruin the surprise. I'll be right back. You'll live," she replied, sounding almost like she was calling back to an old joke, which was a good sign that we may indeed have history, but a joke I didn't get, which meant it could be part of an elaborate lie. With that, she grabbed her phone and was off. That took away one idea, to call someone to verify things. I sat there, straining my brain to try remember something, anything to alleviate my uneased mind. However, all that came from it was a headache. Imagine the worst case of writer's block, but about your whole life. Not a fun situation to be in. She was in the store a while, but she eventually came back with bags and bags of stuff. What they were, I didn't know. They were bagged multiple times, seemingly to hide the heaps of contents within. "Hey," I said, lightly. "Sorry for keeping you waiting. I had to get a lot of things. I have a feeling things are going to get messy," she said, cheekily. I laughed it off, notably hesitant. Her demeanor dropped. "Is everything alright?" "Yeah, I'm just adjusting, is all," I stammered. I didn't want to give away my suspicions. Not yet. With this, she seemed to accept it, almost too quickly, and carried on back to how she always was. We were soon back on the road, and my mind turned back to the bags. "So, what's in the bags?" I asked, as I turned my head to peek. "Don't look!" she exclaimed, which shocked me bolt upright, facing forward. But not before catching a glimpse of something metal and sharp. This image lingered in my mind, as I now had more questions than answers. "I'm not your wife," she suddenly said, flatly, out of nowhere. "What?" I exclaimed, surprised. "Is that what you're thinking? You look like you're thinking of something crazy," she said, with a smile on her face. "Oh, no, I'm just, adjusting, like I said." "Okay, well, don't worry. Your surprise is to die for." Those last few words echoed through my mind, while I tried to determine whether it was just an expression or a hint to something more sinister. My fears weren't alleviated when we took some back roads to a middle-of-nowhere, abandoned-looking factory. "Where are we?" I asked, hesitantly. "You don't worry about it. Don't think about it. It'll all make sense soon, I promise. Wait here," she replied. With that, she grabbed all the bags and heaved them with her as she went in the building. My heart was racing. I didn't know what to do, what to think. My eyes darted around, and that's when I saw it. She left her phone. I grabbed it and immediately dialed in the number of my nurse from the card I took earlier. After a few rings, she picked up. "Hello?" she answered. "Hi, it's... Damn, I forgot my name." "Oh, I'm guessing you're Andy. Car accident? Day out with the wife?" she replied, making the last one sound mischievous. "Yes, well, I'm actually calling about that. I'm a bit scared," I replied. "Well, what's wrong?" she replied, more seriously this time. "How do you know she's my wife?" "Well, I was startled at the sound of someone outside the car, before I jumped at the sound of the door opening. "What are you doing?" she said, in a mildly condescending tone. "Oh, nothing, I just..." She looked at the phone, then I looked at the phone. "You got a call and you weren't here to answer it. I thought it might be important." I handed her the phone, not really knowing what would happen. What happened next was a short, awkward exchange in which the nurse must have played along and said it was a wrong number. It wasn't long until she had me blindfolded, her guiding me slowly to the door. "We've been hanging out here for as long as we can remember. It's been our go-to spot for special occasions," she narrated. "This old place? Seems a bit weird," I replied. "Don't worry, once you're in, you'll never want to leave." I gulped and stepped in. She walked me through while holding one of my hands. I reached up my spare hand and pretended to scratch my face, but really lifted a bit of the blindfold. What I saw in the short time it lifted slightly was perturbing. Old, rusty chains with hooks hanging from the ceiling, rows and rows of old, rusty tables. It seemed to be an old butcher's place. Things did not seem right. On the other end, she didn't seem put off at all, taking in the surroundings like a familiar friend. The last thing I peeked before the cloth slid back down was a pristine metal table in the middle of the room with a brand new knife, presumably the one bought just earlier. That was the signal, the tipping point that made me realize she was not as she seemed. None of this made sense. No memory of a wife, no wedding ring, an abandoned butcher's shop, a freshly bought knife. She was going to end me here. And I let it happen. But I didn't have to. She didn't know I was suspicious of her, or at least she didn't know how strong my conviction of the suspicions were. I slowly lifted my blindfold again, but this time she took note of it. "Hey, no peeking, you'll ruin that..." I quickly picked up the nearest object and swung it. She must have been expecting it, because she ducked the first one, but she didn't dodge the second or the third. Soon she was on the floor, twitching. My heart sank. What had I done? I reeled back in shock. But now I was safe. My shoulders dropped, and I let go of the old pipe that was now covered in a thin coat of red. "Surprise!" I heard from all around me. This outburst made me fall to the floor. I scrambled around, trying to gather myself. I quickly snatched up the pipe and clutched it to my chest, not knowing what to expect. I turned to face where the exclamations had come from, and my entire world shattered. My friends, all standing there, holding a cake. The faces that were looking at me all came back. The surroundings all made sense. Our old hangout spot. It's where I made my friends. It's where I had all my childhood adventures. It's where I met my wife. Their faces all shared the same emotion of shock and disgust. I was pulled out of my trip of nostalgia when a blood-soaked hand gripped my leg. I looked across at what remained of my beautiful wife's face as her life left her eyes.